Hello everyone, and welcome to another season of Meet the Candidates. We are in the fall 2022 election cycle, and joining me on the first episode of Meet the Candidates for this season is a candidate running for the 6th Plymouth District State Representative seat, and that's Ken Sweezy. Ken, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, Jonathan, thanks for having me, and first episode of the season.
Yeah, it's always exciting, so we always love to have candidates on. So we're going to talk about a wide variety of items today, not only who you are, your background, and some of the issues. So we always start off with, for those that don't know you, who is Ken Sweezy?
Yeah, absolutely. So I live and was raised over in Hanson. Been there a big portion of my life. Grew up, my family has a small business just outside the district in neighboring Whitman, Sweezey Fence. So really kind of grew up, cut my teeth as a, teenager through high school and college summers, just digging holes, doing a manual labor job, which was a great experience, one that I think is pretty unique nowadays. After that, went on to get my bachelor's degree in forensic science from Loyola University Chicago, and was very fortunate enough to start a career in law enforcement after that. Did nearly 4 years with the St. Louis Metro Police Department, a top 5 most violent city in America. So we were very busy, but I was beyond honored to serve next to all those people in that great city. Once COVID happened, like many people, I started looking at what I was doing. Mm-hmm. Sort of reevaluated and jumped over to the private sector from there, and was able to get back and start getting involved in areas in Massachusetts and be back home and stuff like that. So I've been in the private sector 2 years, getting involved, member of my local RTC, also serve on 2 committees in town, serve on economic development and capital improvements. Some issues that are really important, as you get into the municipal government stuff, and I know we'll talk a little bit about that, but it's been a great pleasure to realize what municipal government does and serve alongside some volunteers as well. So.
Yeah, I don't think people realize the importance of being involved in municipal government, how much it impacts their daily lives.
Absolutely.
So why jump on those 2 committees?
Yeah, so with the small business background with my family, economic development in these towns I feel like is so important. Marshfield, obviously they have a lot of unique industries. Duxbury as well, being adjacent to the ocean and stuff. But as you go a little bit farther inland as well, the industries start to change, and it's hard. I would say hard area to start certain types of businesses. So a town like Hanson, where I'm from, has limited commercial prospects. So making sure that we do everything we can to support small business is really important, from, me being just a resident of Hanson to serving for the town, and, going forward, obviously, as potential state rep, making sure that it's a great area to start and run, particularly a small business, is super, super important. And capital improvements is another area as well, that has a lot to do with, the town meeting process and how we can make the town better, and I think those 2 things are connected. So that's sort of the inspiration behind those as well.
So 6th Plymouth District, it's new to Marshfield, so
yes.
We've always been part of one district. Now it's broken up to 2. So why have you decided to run for this seat?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I love where I grew up, right? That's, why after going off, and I had my dream job, right? I was a forensic scientist and I loved every minute of it, but I was really excited about the prospect, just that time in life where I had the opportunity to move home. And as soon as I did, I knew it was the right decision. An area I love, like I said, I've been all over the district, whether I was working for my family business. That's when I was out on site, meeting a lot of people, and the opportunity to get involved. And as soon as I started, I knew this was the right path for me. It's, the reason I left that job to go and try something else is I wanted to help more people. That's what it was about. It was a time when, with COVID, crime was skyrocketing. A lot of things were going on, in the country and in municipalities everywhere. So I was like, how can I help more people? I worked over 200 homicides while I was in St. Louis. And for every one we helped solve, there was 2 more in its place. And that was hard, right? So how do I serve even more people than that? How do I help public safety officials more than I was already helping, and I think this is the way to do that. So that's really what inspired me to take a hard look at public office and why this is the right move.
Excellent. So we always like to do a little Civics 101 here on the
Sure.
show. So what's the role of a state representative?
No, that's a great question because it's one of the ones I get asked probably when I'm out knocking doors the
Right.
most, right? People, understandably, there's a lot going on in the world, and people, whether you're raising kids or running a business of your own, anything, there's a lot going on. You can't keep up with everything. So that's why the biggest part of these races with these seats is it's part education, right? I'm running, but I'm also a teacher of civics, like you're alluding to there. So obviously we legislate, right? Part of your state rep is to, write bills, vote on bills, things like that, sort of form policy, your party's caucus that, sort of shapes where the state's budget is going to go, the money's going to go. That's a lot of the stuff you're going to hear in the news, but a big piece of it as well is the constituent services, and that's just as much a part of the job, right? That's 50%, if not more, a lot. I heard all sorts of stories of people talking about, someone's overseas studying abroad and their kid's passport expires and they don't know who to contact. It's helping people navigate the systems, right? Or during COVID when it's unemployment, that was a really, really big one where every office really got really well attuned to how to navigate that system because so many people were introduced to a system they hadn't been familiar with before. So the constituent services just as much as the legislating.
So what are some things that you can take from your professional and personal life and apply it to this position?
Sure, and I think a big piece of that as well is life experience, right? So I come with a unique combination, I believe, of personal experience, professional experience. Growing up, I still remember I was younger at the time, but 2008 when the financial crisis happened, I remember hard conversations around dinner tables. That was a very serious reality, not just for my family, and we were fortunate enough, obviously the business is still open now, and we're starting to see the beginning of something similar. It's not housing related this time, but we are going into a recession area right now. We're really already there, and people are going to start having tough conversations. So I think understanding that from not only the personal aspect, but also being the product of generations of small business owners, hearing my grandparents, my parents talk about it, my dad who's been operating it for a while now, talking through that struggles, that where we're going right now, I understand what that's going to do to business owners, individuals, workers, things like that. And then of course the public safety piece, that's one of those big issues that gets talked about, and it's honestly I shouldn't say overly emotional, but it's often a very emotional conversation, and I think it's very important. I talk all the time with, we may not have all the right answers, but stakeholders need to be involved, and I've come to appreciate that fact because I was actually a part of the system, working next to, whether it was politicians doing the funding, whether it was the men and women in blue that I served with, whatever it may be. That's uber important to understand what they're actually feeling, thinking. They're not just someone in your piece of rhetoric or news release, right? It's really important to have those experiences when we're talking about these hypersensitive topics that we're going to face quite regularly in the future.
So jumping around, where do you sit on the political spectrum?
Sure. The way that I often phrase it to people is that I am a traditional conservative, but a son of the Commonwealth. And I think we have a very unique brand of republicanism, and obviously that is sort of up for debate right now. There's the national environment seeps into everything, even Massachusetts, but you see, 5 of our last 6 governors have been Republicans, and that takes a certain type of Republican to do in a traditionally blue state, if you will. So I think I am attuned with the majority opinions on many issues that are in the state of Massachusetts, as well as obviously being a little bit younger, relative to a lot of other politicians or people in the party or anyone plugged into this arena. So I understand those, I think I fit into some demographics, other I don't as far as opinions on certain things, but that is the way I like to phrase it. A conservative, that's a son of the Commonwealth.
So finish the statement for me then. So if you like X, any political figure that you want to name, you'll like Ken Sweezy.
Sure. Not to go to be really avant-garde with my answer there and then go to as traditional as Ronald Reagan, but right. The focus is financial issues. Like I said, as we're slipping into recession, the focus has to be on, making sure that the government is not overly bloated, the government's not hurting economic activity, and that the government is just doing things to help you. and to help your business and to help your family and protect your kids and things like that. So that is really what's important going forward.
So most races have that one hot button issue. Is there one in this race, and if so, what is it?
Sure. So there's certain issues that are really becoming really big this time. I think there's a particular focus on the ballot questions in this cycle, whether it's the driver's licenses for undocumented immigrants that, from everything I hear, is breaking records with the amount of signatures that they collected. The volunteers did a great job, and it's an issue that people feel very strongly about. So I think that's something that's going to be really, a big focus going forward, because the legislature, of course, passed it last year, and there was about 100,000 originally unverified. I think it was around 75,000 verified signatures that got submitted, which is well above the 41,000 they needed. So that's going to be a big issue. People are going to turn out for that, and I think that legislators are going to have to answer for their votes on that. Governor Baker, I think, did a great job. He's very well liked in the state, a 70+ point approval rating still to this day, and he vetoed it with some very strong concerns, and I agree with the governor on many of his concerns. So I think that'll be talked about and how legislators have voted on it in the past, as well as this new, I shouldn't say new, but now that it's come to the forefront, the 1986 law that's triggering this $3 billion in tax rebates. I think that's going to be something that's talked about for a long time. One, not only how this slipped through the cracks, but how is it going to actually be doled back out? Is it going to be efficient? And I think the biggest thing to watch is going to be when they go back into formal session. If I was a betting man, how quickly they're going to try to overturn and get rid of that law. So one thing I definitely want to do is make sure that I protect that passed as a ballot initiative. The people spoke, regardless of how long ago it was. This is something that's good, and especially now, people need it. People certainly need it.
I won't ask you your position on ballot questions, but I do ask a ballot-y type question, and I'll give you a preview in case I do a forum with you. So, ballot questions. Do we keep them as is? Do we change them, or do we get rid of them?
The existence of ballot questions?
The existence of ballot questions.
Oh, I love ballot questions. Okay. I really do, because, people talk about Massachusetts, a blue state, or whatever it may be. Even in a presidential election that's really contentious, and you'd say a blowout when it's, 65-35 last cycle, the Massachusetts legislature is still way overrepresented for one party. It's, 85 or 90%? One party. That's not representative of what the population actually thinks. So when you get an issue, say like this driver's license bill, that the legislature is clearly well off of, whether it remains or not, it's up to the people, and I'm happy to live with whatever the people decide, but I am very confident that it's not going to be at the margins that it passed the legislature, which again was like 90-10. So I'm definitely in favor for hot button issues or something that's really important that the people need to pass. I definitely appreciate the ballot process.
So it's a newish district, I'll say.
Yes.
Marshfield's now part of this district. So what do you think is the biggest challenge facing it currently?
Marshfield in
or
particular?
the district.
This
new 6 Plymouth.
Yeah, it's really interesting because there's really two schools of thoughts on how the district is drawn and just splitting towns in general. Some people are really excited about it, and some people are really not excited about it. And some people say, "Oh, well, it's great. We now have 2 state reps that represent Marshfield." But others may say that, "Oh, it's watering it down because I have such a small part." I'm excited. Marshfield's a great place to live, raise your family, have a business, and visit in the summers, everything like that. So I'm really excited. The district, for anyone who is listening, I actually don't think we've listed it completely. It's all of Duxbury, most of Pembroke, most of Hanson, 4 and 2A in Marshfield, and then Precinct 2, just one of them in Halifax. So it's parts of 5 towns, and it used to be just 3. So, I'm excited to represent all 5, and the way I say it to people is, people who live in Precinct 4 and 2A in Marshfield, they want their whole town of Marshfield to succeed, right? And the things that everyone in Marshfield cares about, Precinct 4 and 2A care about. So therefore, I'm going to do things that benefit all of Marshfield, right? So I'm excited about the opportunity to, the biggest challenge, of course, there is, now I'm meeting with 5 police chiefs, 5 fire chiefs, 5 select boards of health, maybe recreation, historical, whatever it may be to get things done that they want. The challenge on our end and making sure that we have just the time This is a very time-consuming process, whether it's just meeting everybody, and then once we go to start legislating and hearing everyone's needs, that's definitely a challenge. You don't want to water that down, but obviously the state Senate is able to do it, and they have multiple municipalities as well.
So how are you going to make sure those needs are met by hearing each community? Because the needs of Duxbury might be different than the needs of Pembroke or parts of Marshfield.
100%. And what I really appreciate about this district is I think it is one that is extremely diverse socioeconomically, geography-wise. Certainly fair to say that what Halifax and Hanson needs is different than Marshfield or Duxbury or Pembroke, whatever it may be. So I'm really excited. There's great things in every municipality in this district. So the biggest thing, and when I talk to everybody, what do they need? And this is whether we agree, whether we don't agree, maybe legislating in a certain way, but it's all about meeting people where they're at, right? It's 100% making sure that all the stakeholders are sitting at the table when you're talking to them. So if we're doing, passing bills or in committee about public safety, I got to make sure that I'm talking to everyone that's involved, and whether that's, talking to them on the phone or bringing them in, doing a town hall, just answering them accordingly, whatever it may be. And, I think that's been a big problem in the past for a lot of people, is that they have felt that their voice or their interest, and I say interest just to mean, say, public safety as an example, maybe they weren't consulted with certain things that have been passed, or, they understand that everything's not going to go their way. They really do. Some of the best conversations I've had is people have never asked me to agree with them 100% of the time. I've been in this 10 months and not one single person I've met has asked me that. They've always been asked to be consulted. They said, just please pick up the phone, please call us, please answer our calls. That's all we want. We just want to be talked to. And I think that was the biggest problem, not to dive in too deep to one particular issue, but with police reform, last session, I think that was a big problem, is because people felt that they just weren't heard. I think everyone knew the way that it was probably going to go once it made it to the floor, but for certain people to not be consulted is a real shame.
So I want to get into some topics, and there's some things I pulled off your website. So something that's important to you is small business and supporting them. Talk about why that's important and some items you'd work on if elected.
Yeah, absolutely. So of course, with the history and my family, that personally is why I have such a passion for it. Again, whether it's 2008 and where we're going economically right now, why it's such a big focus is, the personal history with me, understanding what small business owners and the employees of those small, but more than 50% of people are employed in this country by small businesses. That's really important. So that's who we should be looking out for, not the big box stores and things of that nature. So it's personal for me as well. What we need to do to help them, obviously through COVID, some of the hardest hit were hospitality, bars, restaurants, venues, things like that. And so we need to take special care to make sure. I still believe that they're not back to where they are. You go in, I think, to any of your favorite spots across the district, and they'll feel different on a Friday and Saturday night or whenever you're in there. And I truly believe that they need to be helped. What we can do about it, we really need to take a hard look that we're not regulating any business for the sake of regulating businesses. I heard someone say the other day that it takes like multiple permits to hang something up in a restaurant or something, or to put in a new TV or something to that effect. And, the point being, we need to make sure that if something is going to regulate a business, hurt a business, cost a business money, it should only be for the safety of its patrons, right? If it's not for that purpose, there's no reason. The government doesn't need to have its hand in as many cookie jars as it does. And I think that's a general philosophy that I'm bringing that's quite a bit different as well. And that's part of, shrinking a bloated state government. But looking really deep and hard at all the regulations on businesses, against particularly hospitality that's been hit hard the past couple of years, I think is a really, really good way to start.
Technical education is something that, I'm involved with a few business groups that we've been talking about for almost 10 years now. We've heard it from politicians, we've heard it from people coming in here. So talk about, if you're elected, how would you work to improve technical education in the
Absolutely.
district?
Absolutely. It is super important, and I think that's why many people talk about it, and it's unfortunate that it's been so long with so little done. I think an admirable and extremely attainable goal in the state of Massachusetts would be any child that wants to go to a technical school should be able to. From my understanding, nearly everyone or all of them across the state operate now in a lottery system because the demand is so high and there's so little space. And I think that's a shame with, one, the surplus that we have, the quality of education that we have, understanding, and this is a big problem, I think one of the biggest problems that being said, that we have such a great system, is that we are too one-size-fits-all in the Commonwealth. We really are. We need to understand what students, parents, families want for their kids and what they want for themselves, and meet those needs. We shouldn't be operating on a cookie-cutter curriculum, cookie-cutter budgets, and forcing kids into these boxes that they don't belong in. So again, admirable goal, making sure that we expand all technical schools, and if it's not feasible, whether it's out west or in our own district, because I believe not all 5 towns are a part of a technical school right now district. So even if it's supporting a school to, we may not be able to offer everything, but if we can build a wood shop or have a mechanic come in after school, whatever it may be, we need to make sure that you want to talk about no child left behind. It should be no child should ever be left out of technical education. And this is one of the few times that I think I would admit that more money needs to be thrown at this issue. I think that, funny enough, government often thinks that's the issue, just more money, and it doesn't solve the issue. But this is one that clearly you need more room, you need more tools, you need more teachers and educators, and South Shore VOTEC should probably be double the size. It really should. So we need to figure out what the best way is, and again, that's bringing stakeholders in. We want to talk to the superintendent and the administrators at South Shore VOTEC, and for all the member schools and everyone in this district, and see, hey, do you want the money to build your own wood shop, or can we afford to add to the facilities and get everybody into a technical school? But this is something that needs to come to the top of the list, because like you said, it's been talked about for a long time, and kids are getting left behind.
Yeah, so another thing is, something you talk about on your website is that towns shouldn't have to choose between dramatically raising taxes, like things like overrides, and losing essential services. So why is this an issue, and what can you do about it if elected?
Yeah, so I think we have a big problem in Massachusetts where, this law or this bill sounds really good, and it will help people, which is great, but we operate using way too many unfunded mandates in this state. It is insane that they try to kick the can down to our municipalities that frankly just can't afford it, no matter what type of financial situation. We have some towns in the district that are in great financial shape and some that are in less so of a great shape. But either way, you can't rely, they need to increase their police training by 2,000 hours. The town can't afford to pay them that. Or, hey, this special education requirement is all 100% on the town. How are we supposed to make sure all our kids get a good education when so much of the funding is being held up by municipalities from these regulations? Or, I know we're going to talk a little bit about water too, but water regulations and things like that, what they're doing, it's all on the towns, and it's not fair. So if we are going to regulate, I would propose that we have a limitation on the total amount of money that we can kick down to the towns. And if you limit that cap and you say, okay, from now on, a certain type of regulation or a certain X, dollar amount of regulation, whatever it may be, when we cross that threshold, the state is responsible to fund it. I'd be willing to bet we'd have a few less regulations being passed the legislature, which one would be good. But if it is that important, because of course there are regulations that are important and things that'll help people, we need to make sure that the state is there to support our towns, because it's the same thing that they've been doing a business that I was just talking about. They're actually doing the same things to the town, and it's something that most people don't appreciate. And unfortunately, the selectmen in these towns usually are the ones that bear the brunt of this, because they are just following the law. The selectmen are not there really to politic much. They're there to just do the administration of the town. There's very little politics, believe it or not, in that. And I have truly gained the greatest appreciation for everyone in town government, because they do the best with what they can. Trying, like to your question, not raise the taxes, but make sure that our police and fire are funded and they're trained up to the law. The schools are complying with state law and everything else to keep us safe. And they have a tall task to do, but they do a great job of it in general. So that's something that the state really needs to take that burden on.
So something that you had mentioned, and I found this really interesting, is that you'd like to establish an automatic income tax reduction. Why is that?
Sure. So that's one possible idea. You see, like I mentioned, that 1986 law that's now rebating the $3 billion. My biggest thing is why go through the process? You had to certify the number. It had to go through the state auditor's office. People are waiting for this money, and as we see with such a horrific inflation rate, the money that they're being rebated every day is losing value. Every single day, you're technically getting less money back than if you would have gotten it back initially. So why are we going through a rebate process? Why does it require so much? Again, one idea, I think if legislators can have it automated pay increases without having to vote it in. I think if we set up some thresholds, if we set up certain collection or surplus numbers, that should just automatically, rather than going through a rebate system, hey, the income tax rate could probably slip down to 4 or 5 or 4% next year because we've over collected that amount we expect. I mean, that's assuming that we don't keep losing 50,000 people every year, you know, people that are fleeing the state. But if we're expecting these revenues, and we really need to work on this surplus and put it to good use. If legislators can get an automated pay raise with how good the economy is doing, then individuals in the state should be able to as well.
So, speaking of the State House and legislators, is there a greater need for transparency at the State House?
Yeah, I think that goes without question. We have quite the reputation nationally. You know, going to school out of state, I know a lot of people who are involved in politics in other states, and Massachusetts has the reputation for being one of the least transparent state houses. You know, obviously us staying closed for nearly 2 years, a year and a half, a lot longer than every other state house in the country. You know, and then there's so many transparency issues, whether it's committee votes not being public, that's an easy one. And what I really like about this issue and what's so interesting, I really think we can make a lot of headway on this because it's very bipartisan, extremely bipartisan. The farther left you go as well, a lot of progressive groups care a lot about these issues too. And I think that concerns a lot of the people serving right now, but I think there's a lot of movement to be made, a lot of positive movement to be made on this issue. And I'm certainly excited about this. I've had people left, right, center, all talk to me about this issue, and I think it's one that can be fixed pretty quickly.
Great. So the threat of PFAS chemicals is something I wasn't really sure on, so I was doing some reading. So why are they a threat and how they impact the district? And how would you solve it as a rep or work on it as a rep?
Yep. So for people that aren't familiar, PFAS chemicals, it's a type of essentially broken down fluorine type chemical. It's used in a lot of industrial products. It's actually becoming really big right now as well for getting firefighters sick, causing cancers and other diseases because their foams and some of their equipment have it in it. So there is exposure to it causes extreme health risks. So not only are our firefighters directly in the way, just trying to keep us safe as well, and that's something we need to address as a separate issue. We need to make sure we look out for them, whether it's investing in the research to get them better equipment that's actually keeping them safe from all threats, not just fire, but particularly PFAS in water. This is actually becoming a huge national issue, but we're having a hard go of it in Massachusetts, and it's one that people really aren't talking much about. Duxbury actually closed a well last year, and if you see a lot of the issues that we're having, whether it's the extreme weather conditions with droughts, closing wells isn't really an option. And again, everything's connected, right? It's the drought connects to having to close the well in Duxbury, and the government set a regulation that you can't consume water that's over so many parts per million of these PFAS chemicals. So there was no funding mechanism to that. So they said, oh, well, you have to close your well. Well, at some point, what happens if a second, third, fourth well, you need to drink water, right? What's going to be their solution? Shipping down Poland Springs down to Duxbury? That's not a good, so we need to be able to fund these mandates. The select board over there was considering putting in filters, exploring drilling new wells, all of that stuff, and it was all on them. You know, and again, that's not fair. So all these issues are connected, but PFAS is going to become one of the biggest environmental threats that we face. And it's one that needs to be addressed. Again, the funding piece, making sure that towns can combat it, also making sure that we're protecting our waterways, protecting the groundwater. And there's a whole host of other issues with water in our district as well.
So we're at the home stretch here, and I know we're running short on time, so we'll do a little quick lightning roundish fun stuff. So what's a Ken Sweezy fun fact?
Really fun fact, actually, when I was in school, I needed a summer job, and I actually worked for the Chicago Cubs when I was in school. I was there in 2016 when they won their World Series championship, so being on staff, I won a ring. And then I was actually working when I was with the police department in St. Louis. I worked part-time for the Blues and actually won a Stanley Cup ring when I was there in 2019. Unfortunately, that was against the Bruins, so I hope I don't lose any votes there. But actually, I have 2 World Championship rings, one NHL and one MLB ring.
So, in the movie about your life, who plays you?
Sure. This has to be your hardest hitting question to date.
Yep, it is.
My brother's actually quite the cinephile, so he'll be mad if I don't have a good answer. But I don't want to pick a stereotypical Boston guy, so let's go with a newcomer, Timothy Chalamet. Besides our uncanny resemblance, I'd say he's taken away a lot of jobs from some actors that have probably been there around 10 years. So I think that would probably be a good comparison.
If people want to find out more about you, where can they go?
Yeah, please visit my website, my social media. My website's going to be sweezy4staterep.com. That's Sweezy, F-O-R, staterep.com. A lot of information on there that tells you how to get involved and covers a couple more issues than what we covered here. And then I update everything on social media as well. So.
And last but certainly not least, why are you the best candidate for this position?
I think I'm the best because of that personal and professional experience. I care about these communities tremendously. I am going to be around. I am dedicated to hearing everybody out, sitting with all the stakeholders, and bringing my experience from small business, private sector, public sector, law enforcement, everything together, and serving the community as best as I can.
Well, Ken, we want to thank you for joining us today and want to wish you the best of luck on the campaign trail.
Awesome. Thanks again for having me, Jonathan.
All right, and that's all the time we have for Meet the Candidates. Until next time, make it a great day.